Hello and welcome to another Bodgit and Leggit video. Yes, we have a Jeep in, and can anybody guess what's wrong with it? Answers on a postcard. It's a 2006 Nissan Navara. Now, obviously, as you can hear, we have a wheel bearing. Now, sometimes, especially on bigger vehicles, you don't really hear the wheel bearing inside as like a whirring noise. Because depending on your engine, if you've got a big, huge diesel engine, sometimes the engine can actually drown out the noise of the wheel bearings. So, you know, you do kind of have to maybe listen out for different things. What this is actually doing, as you're driving and turning the wheel, it's actually clicking. Now, you can feel the sensation through the steering wheel. You can't hear it clicking. It's not like a CV joint click, but you can kind of feel it through the steering wheel. It's weird, but if you had one of these Jeeps and you felt that, believe me, you would know there's something wrong. You might not know exactly, but you would know there's something wrong. So yeah, it just depends on your car. Petrol cars, you can more or less always hear wheel bearings, depending unless you got big kind of sports exhaust on them. But with especially kind of bigger vehicles, big vans and big Jeeps, you just might not hear it as clearly. And also with this, we get the whole wheel bearings. We get the whole hub, wheel bearing, ABS sensors, everything, which unfortunately does make it quite expensive. It's just the way it goes. So what we need to do is we need to whip off this wheel. Once I've whipped off the wheel, I'll turn the camera back on and we'll get into it. Right, so as you can see, we have the wheel off. Yes, the brakes do need doing, but that's for another day. First thing you want to take off is the actual big bolt here. And the reason is because if it is hard or if it is stuck, you can actually wedge the disc against the caliper before you take the caliper off. So I would suggest taking this fella off first. So first thing I'm going to do is just take off the split pin, which can sometimes be a bit of a nightmare. There we go. Now it's a 32mm, but because this sticks out quite a long way, you're going to need a long reach 32mm socket. Your old air gun out. See, that's the advantage of an air gun. If you didn't have one, like I said, you can actually wedge the disc against the caliper and just use a normal kind of big bar. But if you take the caliper and carry it off, it's just a lot harder to do it. So I just like to do it first. And as we can see, that's nice and loose, which is a good thing. The next thing we need to do is take off the caliper and the carrier. Now we should be able to take this off in one go. So I'm going to leave the caliper on. I'm just going to take off the two bolts, which look like 19mm. You know, I'm not going to be able to get the camera in, but they're just right behind here, two 19mm bolts, which will release the caliper and the carrier. But what I have to do first, because we've got a big lip on the disc, I just need to push back the caliper a little bit, and I need to do this without causing any damage. So if I can just get this lever bar in somewhere, which at the minute, unfortunately, I can't. What we might do on this one is just take off the caliper as well. It's not the end of the world. If I can't get any decent place to do this, I'm going to have to take it off. And it's getting in a place where it's not going to cause any damage and bending any of these little metal things. No, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm just going to whip off the caliper. So it's going to be a 17 spanner here and a 14mm spanner. Take off the actual nut. So there we go. Do the bottom one. That's tight, so I'm just going to crack it with the bigger one first. There we go. This will allow us to take off just the caliper. There's the two bolts. This should now come off. Yeah, what we need to do with that, because you don't want stress on the actual brake line, we can just get a bungee cord here and hook it over the top wishbone and hook it on itself again there. It's just to hold it. It stops putting pressure on any pipes and it kind of gets out your way too. We can then take off pads. There's one. And there's two. We will be doing another video on changing these pads and discs because they are bad. But that's for another video. So, two 19mm bolts to take off the carrier, which we cannot get the air gun in. I'm just going to use this big snap-on bar. This is our competition prize. So if you haven't checked that video out yet, I suggest you do it. You could win one of these. Oh, that was tight. Now I've cracked them. I'm going to use my smaller air gun, which just means they can get in. It's going to be quicker. There we go. The carrier is off. These two bolts back here. Now the disc should slide off. Lovely. Now, this is what we're going to be getting, all this. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. And they're on the inside of the hub. We might have to disconnect either the bottom ball joint or the top ball joint. I'm going to try it without first. You can't quite see it on camera. They're just here. It's two here and two there, and that will slide out the hub. Now, if they just did it the other way around, where they had a big hole here and the bolt was through there, you could just whip out the 4 bolts nice and easy. But because we can't on this one, the top 2 might not be an issue. It's the bottom 2 that can potentially be the issue. Now the 4 17mm bolts, I'm going to use a small extension, and unfortunately that small extension gets in the way of the CV joint. So in other words, it's not, if you look at it at an angle, so I can only get this at an angle, I can't get this flat. And the problem is, if you round these, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have to take everything off. So I'm going to get a wobbly bar to see if I can actually get it in this straight and just have the bar at an angle. I have a shorter extension, as you can see, but not only that, this is a wobbly bar. And what that means is when you push it all the way down, it's nice and square. You lift it up a little bit, as you can see, the actual socket can move. And that bit of movement there, that bit of angle, should hopefully help me no end. And it absolutely has done 100%. It's just behind here. So again, I'm going to use the big ratchet. Now the problem I'm having is that's too short. So I'm going to go for this wobbly bar now. This one might show it a little bit better just how much they can actually move. Now that should hopefully be good. Because the problem is the CV joint was in the way of me getting the ratchet on. Right. Let's see what happens here. Right, well we've got one, which is bloody good. The bottom one, I don't know. No. See, this is the problem. This is why you have to spend an absolute arm and a leg on tools, because they can save you hours and hours of work, but the problem is they ain't bloody cheap. So it really is a catch-22, but it's bloody annoying catch-22. See, that's not going to work. The smaller one on the bottom, so maybe even a longer one. I'll just check this one again, because maybe the longer one will work. So I have even a longer wobbly bar now, and hopefully this one will work. And no, can't get that one at the minute, but we'll worry about the top 2 first. What I am going to do is turn the steering, and if I turn the steering, that should release this bottom bolt for me. So I'm going to do that first and then turn the steering the opposite way to do these 2. Right, so as you can see, the steering wheel is fully locked. And lovely, it means I can get this one on. Now you don't have to go down this route, you can strip a lot more, but it's like everything, time is money. The less you can strip, the better it is. There's one, 3 more to go. Now if I turn the steering the other way, we should be able to get the other 2. Now hopefully, if I move the camera in a little bit, no, still can't see, but you'll get a little bit better idea. So as you can see, the angle, hopefully you can see that socket is on that bolt flat, but look at the angle of the bar, it's up quite a bit. That's the beauty of wobbly bars. So hopefully I can get this on, which I can, and there we go. Just save so much time. Mr. Wobbly, you're good. I don't think that's your real name who invented these, but it'd be funny if it was. Now, 1 more to go. And as you can see, this one, I'm not gonna be able to use it. So hopefully, the big wobbly bar, now you can clearly see the difference. And hopefully on camera, you can see the angle. I mean, that is a hellish angle, but yet the actual socket is on straight. Oh, yes, lovely. Oh. Absolutely beautiful. Just getting caught now, but that's my socket more so than anything else. Lovely. Now that just unfortunately shows having a lot of tools saves time. If I didn't have them wobbly bars, I'm not saying I couldn't have got them maybe without wobbly bars, but you could have started rounding the bolts. If you round the bolts, then you're in trouble. I just have to have stripped a hell of a lot more. Now what we need to do is take off the ABS. Now, we actually get a new ABS sensor with the new hub. So lucky enough, we don't actually have to try and take it out of here, because there's a chance to try and take out here, it could just cause all sorts of problems. So there's 3 rubber mountings, so we'll just pull them off, and then there should be a clip which is just here. So don't know if I can get that on camera, but you'll see it when I take it off. Now, so as we can see, we've got 3 little rubber clips, and then just oh, she's all been baggered before, but the actual clip there. So that's it. This should now come out. So with a couple of hits, this should come out, I hope. There we go. Look at that. That's a beautiful sight. It coming off nice and easy. So there we go. Oh, I mean, that is as bad as it gets. But to be fair, you couldn't really hear any noise inside the cab, but that is bad. So you get the new one, bang it in. Now, as we can see, a lovely new shiny one. That sounds, well, that sounds like nothing, because obviously it doesn't make any noise, which is what we want. Most important thing is we're gonna have to be careful of the ABS sensor. Make sure, don't damage it, and put it in the right place. In this stone guard here, you can see a big square hole. That's where the ABS sensor needs to fit through. So we need to do that first, because otherwise we'll be in trouble. Before I do that, I need to clean spline. Stop. I want to clean the splines, give this a good clean up inside here so the new bearing fits nicely. Make sure there's nothing wrong with where the bearing's going to sit in, because otherwise we'll have problems. And now we need to line up the 4 holes, as we can see with this, and also line up everything inside here. So be careful of the ABS sensor. That's what we're going to have to really be careful of now. So we just need to get everything in line, which is more or less there. We can feed one of the bolts through just to kind of give us, right, so we need to twist this whole thing. There we go. And like I always say, you don't tighten anything until you've got all the bolts in place. So we won't tighten anything properly until we've got all 4 bolts in place. Just make sure the cover's lined up, which it is now. Bolts going in. Like I said, it's important you get the ABS sensor right. The ABS sensor has to go through that hole, because otherwise you have to take this all back off again if you don't line that up properly. And this is why you don't tighten anything. I've got 2 bolts in there, and you can still see how much this plate can move, and the actual hub can still move as well. There's just one more. It's at the bottom. Now they're in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten them. No point me showing you, because it's exactly the same way as I did taking it off. I'm just going to turn it, do these 2, turn it the opposite way, and do them 2. Once I have it tightened down, we'll continue with the rest. Now, a couple of things you want to make sure of is you're not forcing the bearing in with the bolts. And what I mean by that is, because there is there's a couple of mil where the bearing has to sit into the hub, don't try and force that in with the bolts, because you could very easily start rounding the bolts or stripping the thread. So don't do that. Make sure the bearing goes in at least 90%. 95%, and then the extra couple of mil you can screw in with the bolts, but also make sure you do it diagonally. So do the diagonal bolts, that way you'll know you'll get it in level. Have a quick look at the bolts to make sure they're all sticking out more or less the same, because they're all exactly the same size. As we can see, well, you can't see, but you'll see when you do it, they're all sticking out the same size. Good thing to do now is just make sure it turns. So it turns. So it does turn, it's not binding, it's not sticking. That's a good thing to check. Now what we need to do is just basically bolt everything back. So I'm going to put on the actual big bolt first. Now what I'm going to do is, once I put all the brakes and stuff back on, I'm just going to get my bar and just give that a final squeeze by hand by blocking the disc. So I'm not going to put the actual split pin in just yet. Thing we can do now is, before we forget, is to put the ABS sensor back. So it fits in little holes all the way along the actual stub axle. So the first one fits right next to where it goes through on the stub axle. And if I remember, it went underneath here for that one, so we need to put that in and around there, and there, so that goes on this one. So we need that inside there for that one, don't we? Yeah, take that one back off. Unless, can I just get it through there first? Might be able to do it this way, save me taking that off. Yep, can do it that way. Goes onto this one. If you put it back in the exactly same place you took it off, you know you're not going to go wrong. What we're really looking for, to make sure, obviously this clips back in together. Now clip that back in there. Now what we're really looking for is to make sure this doesn't hit anything. So it's in place, it's not rubbing against anything, and it's not going to hit anything. Because otherwise, in a few months' time, you're going to be having a problem with the ABS light coming on. So make sure it's routed properly, nicely. You're not going to have a problem. Now what we need to do is just bang on the disc. Sorted. I would suggest you do, if you're putting these back on, is to grease everything up, grease the pads, do absolutely everything to them. I'm not going to do that because we are changing these in another video. So I'm just going to stick everything back on, but it's no harm just to lube everything back up. Even though there's nothing wrong with it, you haven't taken off for that reason, but it's just best to lube everything back up. So I've just turned the disc out towards me to make my life easier. 19 mil, just going to use a small ratchet just to get them in there, just to shoot them down. Right, and I always tighten them by hand. So I just got them in with the air gun to make things a bit faster, and then always tighten everything by hand. Lovely. So what I'm going to do is wedge a screwdriver onto the disc, which wedges onto the carrier. I'm just going to check this to make sure it's okay. Yep, I got a little bit on it. That isn't going anywhere. So we can put the split pin back before we forget. And just bend it by hand. Now, like I said, you should be buttering all these back up, but I'm not going to because we're going to be replacing them. Sorted. Now, you can get caliper back. As long as you haven't pressed the brakes, this should go back. There's no reason why it won't. As we can see, it has. If for some reason you had pressed the brakes, this wouldn't be going back. Now, just screw, line it up first, which can be pretty annoying. There we go. It's the top one lined up, and now the bottom one. And there we go. So just get our 17mm back and our 14mm. Now, I'm just going to put on the wheel next. Now, whatever you do, don't tighten wheel nuts down with an air gun. I have a special setting on mine, which I just get them in a bit, and then once it's on the floor, I tighten by hand. But what you want to make sure now is, make sure it doesn't lock. As you can see, it's spinning nice and freely. What we have to do is screw this back on properly, tighten it, take it for a test drive, make sure the feeling's gone out the steering wheel, and also we need to make sure the ABS light doesn't come on. And if there's no noise and there's no shaking through the steering wheel, that funny feeling through the steering wheel, well then we know. So I'm going to call it for that video. And if there is a problem with it, you'll see an extra part to this. If there's not, then we're all good. So yeah, look, hope it helps. Thumbs up and subscribe. Don't forget, check out our shop, our forum, our website and all that. Sign up to our forum if you haven't already. And most importantly, don't forget, get your hands dirty. See you for the next one.